Hi, Marc. Welcome of part Maven, part Maverick. It's so nice to have you here. And I really enjoyed reading your book, Focus the SML Way. And let's kick this off with my favorite question. And in the spirit of Martin van der Brink challenging people. So, what's your fundamental disagreement with the status quo? Why did you write this book, right? And why do you think it's important?
Okay, well, one of the reasons I wrote the book is that I was surprised myself by seeing how many personal stories were behind this company that was quite obscure for a long time and is now like in the in the middle of a lot of geopolitical turmoil. And for me, it's always interesting to see these human stories behind a lot of technology, and we kind of tend to focus on the numbers or the speed or the numbers of transistors on a chip. And technology is in the end, it's always been built by humans, and it's always funny to find stories who can get that message across. And ASML, as it turned out to be, is full of those very personal stories that kind of define how we use technology these days.
Yeah, no, I think, and that comes across in the book. Um, I think the other sort of theme that was important, that sort of the lesson I took home, and I think
Mm.
something that's underappreciated is the fact that there is a way to build a global high tech company in Europe, and it need not be the Silicon Valley way. But we'll get there soon. But since you spoke about personal stories, I think I have to ask you, what's your story, right? So, what's your origin story? I mean, what sort of made you who you are, and especially in the context of like parallels to some of, let's say, the leading members at ASML, right? Did you feel you had shared cultural heritage of sorts or experiences,
Yeah,
stuff like that?
that's a good question. Well, if you look at the Netherlands, so the ASML started out as a Dutch company. It's a multinational now, but if you look at the Netherlands itself, at the country, ASML started out in the south of the Netherlands. So it's not in the Randstad, as we call it, the big cities like Amsterdam, Rotterdam, Utrecht, The Hague. And so there's usually a bit of a cultural difference between these big cities in the Netherlands and the kind of more rural areas around them. And I was born in a rural area close to the German border, actually. So I grew up listening to and watching a lot of German television, for example. I just grew up right on the border. And so for me, it was quite easy to connect to this cultural background of ASML as well, because we have a thing in common. We weren't born in one of the big cities. And if you look at uh, the manufacturing industry in the Netherlands, that's mainly outside of these big cities. So, and the rest of Amsterdam is, for example, a lot of finance, a lot of software-based industry. But in the case of ASML, which creates and manufactures these chip machines, it's hardware, it's physics, and it's a different kind of profession, so to speak, and it takes a different kind of people. And also the network that ASML built around itself, so the ecosystem, was helped me to understand the company, because in the world of ASML, there's this um, great dependence on supplies and supply chain, and these guys and girls go back long, long time. A lot of the historical ties are based on the Philips heritage. You might recall the Philips Electronics company. Well, that was one of the founding elements of ASML, and you see even in present day part numbers in this ASML machine. It's a crazy machine that has over 100,000 of parts. The part numbers are still called in the way Philips numbered their part numbers. So it's actually the same lingo. So you see a lot of this heritage still these days in ASML.
There's a bit of a personal story that comes to mind, which was that I was born and I grew up on the southeast coast in India, and there was a Dutch gentleman there who actually moved there because he was from a Philips family. I remember sitting with him, and he later on went on to become CEO of a global wind turbine manufacturer, etc. But he was telling me why he left the Netherlands, because he said, I knew I would join Philips, and then I would start at a certain level, I'll work my way up, almost like a bureaucracy. Then you buy one house, then you buy one car, then you buy the second car, and then you retire. And he was like, nah, I don't want that kind of life. But that's something that also comes across your book, which is that ASML is born from Philips, but in many ways, sort of Philips declines almost in parallel to the way ASML booms. And then the big question is really, what drives ASML success and why you chose the title Focus. So, would you like to unpack, right? So, why is the book titled Focus, and what's the focus at ASML?
Okay. Well, first of all, if you look at the machine ASML builds, it's based on the principle of focus. So it's a chip machine, it's a lithography machine, a photolithography machine, which projects an IC structure on a silicon disk, a wafer, and on such a small scale that well, we're talking about nanometers, 1/1,000,000th of a millimeter these days, and to create a light beam that is well so accurate, you really need this optic system and a good light source, and you need a focus. So just like the focus in your well, in your camera, in your digital camera or analog camera, and so that it's part of the product itself. You need focus, and there's another focus that ASML use. So I usually describe it in like 5 dimensions of focus. It's focused on the long term, which is another thing that kind of sets ASML apart from a lot of companies, because they have to build out a roadmap for the entire industry. Well, looking ahead 10 or 15 years, and that takes a different kind of perspective or focus. And there's another element that ASML is very much focused on the on its ecosystem. So it's not only one company; it's actually a network of companies, with ASML being the most important architect and overseeing all the technology. But they're really relying on these partnerships, these intense partnerships, and of course. There's another element that's focused on execution, which means it's very blunt. It has a Dutch style of being direct, sometimes too direct, but in this industry, you really need to, well, sorry for these words, but to cut the bullshit and get to the point, because being too gentle or too careful just adds latency. So it has a very Dutch focused culture. And there's another element of focus, which is the fact that it's become now this very well public company in the sight of every media outlet, but also every politician, because it's such an important company. If you look at the chip machine that ASML builds, I think about 90% of all the chips we use, so over 1 trillion chips, is being produced by an ASML machine, amongst others. So, which makes ASML like this focal point of the entire industry. So that's the reason I call it focused. And getting back to your remark about the Philips heritage. So back in the day, Philips, it was well known for its television sets or CD players, and they also built their own chips. So Philips was like a, would say, like this old-fashioned conglomerate that had this vertical stack of building its own technology, building its own tools to build its own technology. So it also developed the tool to build chips, which is a lithography tool. And Philips had this great lab. you could compare to Bell Labs, for example, like AT and T had. It was called NatLab in the Philips days, and this was kind of like semi-fundamental research. So they really did basic research, and they were quite good at inventing stuff, but they had a hard time industrializing it. So when they thought of this new alignment technology to put the stacks of a chip really accurately on top of each other with a high throughput, which is important for the semiconductor industry, Philips tried to sell this machine, but nobody wanted to buy a tool from their competitor. So other chip makers were really reluctant on accepting Philips technology. And it wasn't a perfect machine, these first samples. So the only way for the technology to thrive was to well, spin it out, and that was like the start of ASML. But Philips really had a hard time exploring commercial possibilities for this lithography tool. So it took another entrepreneur from the Netherlands called Arthur del Prado to pick up this idea and really get Philips moving to spin off the technology. Otherwise, things would have gone completely different, and I think the technology might have been lost. But the opposite happened, and after a really well, a difficult first couple of years, ASML kind of got to grow enough market share to raise more capital to innovate more at a higher speed than its competitors, and in that way increase its market share even more. So nowadays it's at a market share of, what is it, like 85 or 90% in DUV machines. That's a bit less advanced lithography tool, and it has a 100% market share in the most advanced technology, which is EUV.
Yeah, and it's actually fascinating because um, the ASM in ASML is kind of inspired by Del Prado, Arthur Del Prado's company, right? And
Mhm.
he played a role, and then I think he was bought out again by Philips, and so it was almost like a catalyst. When reading the book, that's what I came across. Like he was a key part, but then he never got to really, I think, reap the rewards financially at the scale he would have liked. And Philips also ends up playing a role in some way, with the TSMC investment when Morris Chang goes around the world looking for investors. And had Philips not done it, I think the TSMC ASML duo in the market would probably not have happened in the same way it
Yeah,
did.
yeah. Just to add on to that, I think Philips was very important for the first start of the Taiwanese chip industry, but of course, the execution was quite good, and especially the Taiwanese mindset was a perfect fit for the semiconductor industry. So they're really disciplined people with the creativity you need, and the also the pragmatism you need to uh, build an industry based on pure foundry. And this was, of course, Morris Chang's brilliant idea. But back in the day, he was looking for a technology partner. So he first was looking for Japanese companies like Nikon and Canon, but they uh, refused because they didn't want to help a competitor. And then he went back to the US. He looked, I think he had talks with Texas Instruments and Intel, and they also declined his offer to invest in this new pure foundry venture. And then, well, the last option was like Philips. Philips was quite eager, so they invested 28% in the early days TSMC, which was also a way to get ASML to deliver these first generation of lithography tools. And that was like the start of this, well, special relationship between ASML and TSMC. And you still see it these days.
And Morris Chang has a crazy story too. I think he was a VP at Texas Instruments or at Intel, and then he couldn't kind of become CEO there. And the Taiwanese government basically forced him to set up manufacturing there, which was like crazy to think about. And and he actually became a billionaire by buying TSMC stock on the market. So this
Yeah,
some
Morris's
he
story
yeah.
is very special. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So, but then let's get the focus back on ASML. And I
Mhm.
think so. Mark, one thing that stood out was this anecdote about Gal Smith, who was a private glider pilot and one of the
Yeah.
early CEOs of ASML. And when he figured out that ASML needed to be a bit like an Airbus or Boeing of the industry because the parts required and the various scientific and engineering disciplines required were impossible to package into one company. And so, from your point of view, how critical do you think this was for the future of ASML to be something like an aggregator of high tech?
Okay. When Gjalt Smit, he's still living in Switzerland these days. He was appointed the first CEO of the company, and he was confronted with actually a disaster because ASML was nothing. It was just had just been spun out of Philips, and it started out with nothing because they didn't have any, well, supply chain for themselves. So they had to find new partners, especially the optic system, which is crucial to lithography tool. You could compare to a copier in your office. So you have this light source and a set of lenses, and that's really uh, a specialty job. And only one company they could find was Zeiss from Germany. And this was also the start of a very important partnership between ASML and Zeiss. But when Gjalt Smit started, he started out with nothing. So and he saw this well, a kind of a new business you could compare to the aviation industry. As you mentioned, Boeing is just designing planes, and it's like the architect, but it orders um, a lot of parts from the rest of the supply chain. So even the chairs or the wings or the engines, they all are manufactured somewhere else. And ASML saw this also as an opportunity. Okay, we have to have an other business model than our competitors, because if you look at the historical competitors of ASML, for example, the Japanese companies, Nikon and Canon, these are conglomerates, and they kind of use a lot of their own parts, their own lenses, and ASML had to build another business model. So they chose the aviation model, and Gjeld Smit was the one who saw that as an option to be, well, even more agile, to move faster. Because if you can spread the risk, for example, during downturns in the chip industry, over an entire ecosystem, then it's easier, well, to get back up on your feet again when the market has an upturn again. And if you compare that, for example, to Nikon and Canon, lithography was not the biggest part of their company, so it was easy to, well, decrease the budget of R&D. And ASML saw that as an opportunity. Well, it was looking back, it turned out to be a good thing. But when Gjalt Smit was trying to sell his first machine, he was really quite desperate. And I think he was important for the company because he was a bit of a cowboy type. And also, the last time I interviewed him, he was wearing this huge hat, a fedora, but it could have been a cowboy hat as well. And he had this spirit of, okay, we have to do everything in our power to create some market share in this very full market. Because back in the day when ASML started in 1984, I think there were about 8 or 9 litho players in the market, which made it a very difficult market to penetrate. So ASML had this culture of, well, a cowboy spirit. A lot of, well, um, they were not too careful in finding new ways, for example, to enter beauty contests. And I recall one element. They tried to convince AMD, which was a chip manufacturer back in the day, to buy their tools. And but they had to prove that they had the best tool. And when they built up this one sample in the US, it turned out that their new engine running the wavetables was not capable of doing its job because, well, something went wrong. And they only had 36 hours to correct this. So they flew in an engineer with a suitcase full of new smaller electrical engines, and they snuck into the chip manufacturing fab at night, and they changed the engines, not telling AMD at all, and that was for their. Well, it turned out to be the right choice. So it has a bit of a cowboy spirit, and this was very much in line with aligned with Gjalt Smith's attitude. So he was important for this first attitude of ASML.
Yeah, anyone who reads your book, right? So, and it's something I don't really get Mark's book. It's really one of the most extensive books on ASML out there, and that you have anecdotes like the one he just described, and once you hear them you don't forget them, and it really brings across this cowboy spirit. And if I were to think of three key words coming out of this that really define ASML's culture, for me it's really cowboy, challenge, and collaborate, right? So this sense of we will do it at all cost, and in whatever way required. The focus is to win, and to win in a really tough market, right? And Martin van der Brink's sort of culture, which you write about, of constantly challenging in a very direct touch way. You also describe how I think when you interviewed him the first time, he said, "Hey, why are you writing a book on this?" And then the collaborate part, which really comes across because you collaborate with your customers, you collaborate with your suppliers, and so you have collaboration really both ways. And I think what stood out about the ASML way is they invest extensively in interdisciplinary R&D, especially in the downturns. So they're
Yeah,
going counter-cyclical.
that was kind of their well, formula to success, that they during downturns they didn't decrease their R&D budget, especially compared to their competitors, and that kind of helped them out innovate them these uh, uh, Japanese competitors, and especially when it comes to EUV. So this is a new technology that was being examined throughout the world, researched throughout the world, also in Japan. Intel in the US was very much involved in the first steps of EUV technology, which is like if you would describe the light source, it's kind of a marker. So DUV was like this big marker, a deep UV ultraviolet light, and if you compare that to the light wave of a EUV machine, it's more like a fine liner. So it was basically a tenfold increase of the accuracy. So the lines you could write with the EUV machine were much clearer, but it took like 15 years to for ASML to create a machine that was actually running 24/7 in a chip fab and made it economically viable. And that was kind of a crazy investment. Looking back, no other CEO would have signed off a deal saying, "Okay, we can let's build a machine that will take us 15 years to make money." And but ASML just kind of took up the challenge, especially because Martin van der Brink was the really force behind this, and his team well, kind of hopped on this constant focus on these really small details. And as you mentioned, ASML was very much under pressure of their customers because they were promised to have a machine that could do all these wonders. Um, I think by 2015, and it took them 4 or 5 years longer to build this machine. And it was kind of well, a big gamble, a big bet, but it turned out good in a way that the EV machine is now only been built by ASML, and it's really their key to success now.
Yeah, and I think what really stands out is that, like we discussed, they invest counter-cyclically in R&D, but they also build fast and deploy fast, meaning once they have a prototype, they don't just sit and perfect it, right? Because it's not really a consumer product either. So they really take it out into the factory. And then, the special relationship with TSMC and others help, because both sides are okay with, with fine tuning on the fly, right?
Well,
Because
you bring up a great thing. It's not a consumer tool. So, and if you compare that to the mindset of, for example, the Japanese competitors, uh, also build consumer tools. For example, Japanese cameras are like perfect, and the Japanese had the same attitude. So our little tools have to be perfect as well. And ASML also really embrace the learning cycles. You want to have learning cycles together with your customer, and this was very much also the entrepreneurial spirit of the semiconductor manufacturers in Asia. They were not the market leaders back then, but they were willing to experiment to try to get to the number one position and be better than the market leader, which was Intel back in the day. And so in ASML, they found a partner that could really help them perfect and tweak the systems to create better throughput usually, so they could have a better efficiency on their tools. And the lithography machine is just one tool, but it's a central tool. So every time a chip fab has been built, then like 30% of all the investment goes into litho tool, because it's the most expensive tool and it needs to be filled constantly. And ASML really was spreading out all of its sensors throughout the rest of the fab to create a tool that could really be perfected together with metrology and other elements to not only sell their own tools but help their customers be more efficient. And this is a mindset that really was fruitful for the Asian companies, but Intel had was more reluctant because they have a different different model of production, and they found it harder to adapt to this ASML way, so to speak. And now you see the result these days now with Intel having trouble to leapfrog their Asian competitors. And I think the root of this problem was back in already back in the 90s.
Yeah, and I think the other problem is just this quarterly earnings nonsense and Jack Welch and financial engineering. I think it's destroyed so much manufacturing in the US. And I kind of sympathize with what the MAGA movement is saying, but like you cannot have a booming, stock market and obsession around quarterly earnings and have a successful manufacturing industry. And I think that comes across also in your book, with in Europe clearly, because all these partners are also based either in Europe or in Asia, and they're all playing a longer game by design, by structurally, because there is no way you can invent a new lithography machine in one quarter.
Yeah, and I think that's also one of the conclusions I make in my book, that ASML has this European way of looking at a global business, which is you build long-term relationships with your customers, but also with your suppliers. And if you look at the margins of ASML, they're quite low compared to other, to their peers, to other chip machine manufacturers. But it's also because they build this crazy complex machine, and so they have to rely sometimes on single-sourced partners or a single-source supply chain, which is counterintuitive if you compare that to the automotive industry, for example. They have like 2 or 3 suppliers for every part, so they can change and they can
Again,
get better
because it's a
prices.
consumer product, right?
Yeah,
And it's
it's a
not cutting
consumer
edge.
product, and they have like really small margins. And so ASML has a different kind of attitude. And we were talking about the cultural background within the Netherlands, but there's also uh, a common culture among the countries that are on along the Rhine River. So Germany, Switzerland, Belgium. I'm hoping I'm getting my geography right now, and the Netherlands.
France to some extent, I
Yeah,
guess, right?
France. Yeah. So there's this way of doing business in Europe that's basically not the Anglo-Saxon profit optimization engine, but it's a way of
Not,
building
I
businesses.
would even correct it, not the short-term profit because you are, if you come the way SML is compounded, and you write this in your book too, right? If you even like forget the part where they were private, right? Post IPO, if you bought a share, right, you would have had a 600x in what is it, 25 years, 30 years, and so they clearly know how to compound. They're making shitloads of money, but they're making it in a way that really compounds, right? And I think it's not this, oh, let's squeeze out the next quarter and just see where it's gotten intel, right? Because I mean, there's something that a lot of American economists also write about. I mean, Bill Lazonick from the University of Massachusetts writes about how Intel got destroyed by this short-term profit extraction, and I think way forward also for European entrepreneurs, and our entire discourse here should be also around, if like by playing the long game, we can win in ways that short-term minded competitors cannot. And I think here's the solution, which and like, let's now focus this on the ASML Zeiss collaboration, because you write about this a lot, and it's clearly obvious that both companies need each other. But then you also see the Dutch German friction, and I could almost picture it in my mind when you were describing how they would clash and challenge each other and all of that. And one thing that came out was two companies, one goal. So that was the slogan that really tried to align these
Mhm.
two companies to work together. But like, to unpack this and share some of your learnings on that.
Well, I don't know if you've ever been to Oberkochen, which is like the headquarters of Zeiss. So it's a really small, nice mountain town close to Stuttgart in the south of Germany. And
Between Stuttgart and Ulm, right? If I remember correctly,
yeah,
somewhere
yeah,
there in
yeah,
that region. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
you're right. So it's quite a long way from Veldhoven, where the headquarters of ASML is. But there's a lot of traffic going on between Veldhoven and Oberkochen. And um, the reason is that, well, Zeiss, you could know the company for its prescription glasses, for example. They build lenses and also mirrors, because for an EUV system, the light needs to be reflected. So you need a mirror, not a lens. And to build a lens, well, you need glass and you need crystals, and it really takes a long time to polish it in such a way that it's incredibly flat. So that's one part of the industry. The other part of the industry is Veldhoven, which is also completely different kind of business, because the semiconductor industry is always trying to get the right machines on the right time, which means you have to deliver real quick and assemble really quick according to the demand of your customers. So you have two different timelines. One is the timeline of Veldhoven, really fast paced cowboy style, and the other style is the German style, which is, well, a lot of research, a lot of uh, what do you call it, patience for the glass to
And
grow.
perfectionism probably also, right?
Perfectionism as well, but there's also this element that well, it doesn't help. That's the like the German way of expressing the rush ASML always has. What is it they use? Oh yeah, they compared it to a woman being pregnant. If you put an extra woman next to her, well, the pregnancy doesn't last any shorter. It's gonna take 9 months after all. So they compared well, the creation of a set of mirrors and to this pregnancy. It takes dedication. It takes time. So that's a different way of cooperating or building stuff than ASML is doing. But these two companies are, well, they're depending on each other, because if you look at Zeiss, I think they have billions of revenue just coming from the semiconductor industry, which is ASML. And ASML wouldn't be anything without Zeiss, because the optic system is really the heart of a lithography tool. So these companies have to work together, and it took them a long time and a lot of shouting. And Martin van der Brink, he's the protagonist of the book. really has this, well, Dutch, blunt, loud style, which was counterintuitive to the way Germans, well, tend to cooperate, which is more höflich, so they're more polite, and they also have this tendency to, well, embrace hierarchy, more hierarchy than ASML, because ASML is quite a flat company, especially during the start of the company. And Martin van der Brink also expected his employees or his colleagues to speak up to him and correct him. It really embraced that bit of a chaotic feeling, because chaos is the right well the right environment for more creativity, and you need creativity to find solutions for these really hard problems in physics or chemistry or in optics, for example. And this is just a complete opposite of the average German working culture. But they had to find a mix of them. So it took them a long time, and a lot of also, for example, the what happened is that if a litho 2 was sent back by a customer because the optics system wasn't working right, then ASML, well, they forwarded the bill to Zeiss. So the commercial commitments took a lot of time to be worked out. And so they finally worked on a deal that back in 2016 led to ASML investing like $1 billion in a new lab, and it took a share in Zeiss, or in the foundation that is like the holding of Zeiss. And with the money, they built this huge lab, and really is like a lab you could compare to a James Bond scene where they built these crazy flat mirrors. And the technology is, I think, a technology that couldn't have been developed without shared IP. And you must imagine that it's very hard for companies to well, share their IP with another company. But Zeiss and ASML agreed on this thing, and because they saw a common goal. And getting back to your remark about short-term and long-term vision, I guess what really connected these companies, even though they were culturally miles apart, is that they had this common goal of okay, we're gonna need this in the future. This is gonna be important. So that's why today they're like two companies in one business.
Yeah, the slogan, what is it? Two companies, one goal. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And and you spoke about trust required to collaborate on IP. I think there's just one crazy story that stands out. I think it was Nikon attacking them with patent infringements for the
Yeah,
second time. Yeah,
twice.
yeah. So
Yeah,
the
yeah.
first time I think is kind of a scary story, but they make it through the second time. The way they prepared for it, I think it was the not Christophe Fouquet, but the previous French CEO who said you need to you need to hit them where it hurts. And so Nikon obviously dominates the consumer camera market,
Yeah.
and of course ASML cannot, is not really a camera maker. So but Zeiss is, and so well, at least Zeiss does optics, and so they create this shell company that owns patents and builds up a patent portfolio
Oh,
in
don't
optics.
don't
Yeah,
spoil everything,
I won't
because
get into it, but that's an insane story. I just
it's
want to
the
get
favorite.
listeners excited. Go really
Yeah.
just go through that. Just that story will make the read worth it. It's just
It's
totally epic
one of my
levels of stuff.
favorite. Actually, it's one of my favorite stories, because um, it describes that ASML was getting a more mature company over the years, not only on technology but also on strategy, and it also is a great example of a cowboy spirit. So basically,
100%.
the the way that Nikon was threatening ASML with patents, and of course Nikon being the older company, having done lithography for a longer time, they had a stack of patents that was, yeah, well, way more than what ASML had gotten from Philips. So the only way to prevent a disaster from happening was getting back at Nikon and being prepared for a next patent war. And Eric Maurice was the one who tapped Martin van der Brink, the CTO of ASML, on the shoulder and said, "Hey, you gotta have a well, you gotta have something against them." And they found this weak spot in Nikon, which was their digital camera market in the US, and they secretly bought up all these patents in a shell company and actually built a camera, just a couple of them, to
The
prove.
ZD10 or something like that was the Zeiss
Yeah,
camera,
yeah,
which
yeah.
no one has ever seen.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I got to hold it, and I think it's one of the last samples. Nobody ever got to buy it, but it really was the key to preventing a patent war and even like billions of dollars of revenue loss, because they had to uh, give Nikon a lot of money for every technology they used. And it was quite hectic in these days. But it was like a shootout between two companies. And the funny thing, usually patent wars are, well, they're litigation. It's a bunch of lawyers just waving paper at each other. But in this case, there's really a physical example of technology they had to build to prevent it. And I think that made this patent war very tangible. And for me, it was a very rewarding story to write.
And for a reader to read, honestly. But keeping in mind the time, let's just do a bit of politics and geopolitics, and let's say
Okay.
two
Always.
questions, and then we wrap it up. And I think I want to really focus on this, the learnings for Europe and how we can build more companies like this. But on the politics, I think I'd say domestic/European politics. What stands out is you argue the Dutch government hasn't really understood what a huge asset they have in many ways, and yet at the same time, what's also clear from the book and how you document the amount of R&D, public R&D funding that has gone into ASML success, and both Dutch and European,
Yeah. Well,
taxpayer
let's
money.
let's
So
let's zoom in on those two statements. So starting out with the research part. So in the early days of ASML, the company was uh, on the verge of bankruptcy a couple of times. So they really needed help to keep their R&D at a certain level so they could compete. And during these early days, ASML got a lot of support, financial support from Brussels, so EU money, but also The Hague, Dutch money. And uh, I think they were also lucky with the fact that they had Philips as like a savior sometimes, and the also the effect of one of the huger bigger attempts of the EU to capture the semiconductor market again was called the megabit plan, and kind of faltered, but the end result was that ASML got an opportunity to deliver their first machines to TSMC, which was the start of a great partnership. Um, and so a couple of European and Dutch early subsidies were crucial to ASML's start. Um, but if you look at the R&D spent now, ASML spending 4.3 billion euros in research these days. So in the Netherlands, it's by far the largest investor in research. Um, and the other thing is that the actually I think things have turned around. ASML is very important for the research. So the initial investment kind of spurred a new R&D culture in the Netherlands, where ASML is the biggest partner in.
Do you think there would be a way for the Dutch taxpayers and European taxpayers to also benefit from these investments? Like through have some kind of sovereign structure that holds equity in these companies in which they invest. Like because you're a financial journalist, I wanted to pick your mind on that. How can we build this engine and do more of this?
Well, the Dutch government doesn't have a share in ASML. Like, for example, the US government is taking a share in Intel.
Intel, yeah.
Um, so I really think it's like you described, the long-term view of seeing this opportunity. And sometimes, well, you see that technology doesn't always work out the way you want it to be. Sometimes things go wrong. Like the megabit plan, it went wrong. Philips didn't succeed, and Siemens didn't succeed in getting a lot of market share. But the spin-off was great, and so it always helps in investing in stuff like, for example, quantum, but also photonics, and you see these things happening, and then in the Dutch uh, system, you see there's a lot of emphasis on ASML, but ASML is only one company. And there's a lot of other companies depending on ASML. So this entire ecosystem is, well, also kind of vulnerable, because if anything were to happen to ASML, or there might be a competitor on the other side of the planet, then a lot of Dutch technology wouldn't be in trouble. So you need to well, create alternatives. And for example, photonics and quantum, these are nascent technologies, and you don't know what it's going to be, and you might be wrong sometimes. But you see a lot of investment going into, from the EU, but also from The Hague, going into these nascent technologies. And it's hard to predict uh, whether or not they gonna be successful. But if you're only sure of one thing, if you don't do it, you're sure you're not going to be successful.
Yeah,
And
exactly. And I mean, that's the point, right? You have to take these bets. And this is why it gets very personal because a very close friend, he actually did his PhD in photo and nanophotonics at the University of Utrecht, where I think you live too.
yeah,
And had a really interesting paper in Nature, where for a given light source, he was able to make a material disappear,
mhm,
like be essentially invisible from an optical perspective. And like that's the layman's story, right? It's obviously way more sophisticated. But then, he goes on to join ASML after his PhD and, works in technical support, then in R&D, and now he's at the fabs. And so I think just seeing this friend's, very close friend's journey, you realize how ASML actually kind of develops its talent, and
mhm.
I think the embedding on the shop floor is so critical. And I just want to read out a few lines that sort of really stood out, which is, despite being a quasi monopolist for lithography machines, ASML knows that its market dominance is founded on long term alignment with the ecosystem it operates in. And the quote here is, treat large and small chip manufacturers equally and don't overcharge them. So Martin van der Brink was hell bent on staying modest and humble. He knew that abusing the company's monopoly would be its downfall. The Dutch chip machines are intended to serve a global market and enable technological advancement for the common good. Making a profit is a side effect, not a goal. Right? This perspective fits ASML's view on the world. Chips are defined as weapons in the tech war, but Feldhoven sees things differently. In their opinion, technology is non political. It is a way to connect the world to make it better, cleaner, healthier, and more efficient. So, like, given the crazy heated geopolitics we live in, how, like, is like, I understand that on the market side you can kind of keep Martin van der Brink's vision of like it's just critical for this ecosystem that you be more long term and that you share and collaborate also the profits and you don't get selfish. But on the other front, right? How do you stick to your values when the world goes crazy?
Actually, I don't know the answer to that, because, uh, well, looking back, I think the uh, the growth of ASML is completely aligned with globalization and the fact that concentration is, well, and is the best economical circumstance for the semiconductor industry, because, well, that's more efficient. But nowadays, it's no longer the case. that you can just freely concentrate everything on just one island, as it happened right now in Taiwan. So, well, you have to create or duplicate a more fragmented ecosystem, which is less efficient, and this could affect the amount of capital you can spend on R&D. So it actually might slow down innovation. So that's a long-term view. But if you look at the short-term view, of course, there are a lot of geopolitics happening now, and you could have an opinion about that. But it's not only geopolitics. You have other disasters too, like pandemics. And I think that's also one of the themes throughout the book is in 21, when there was a huge chip shortage, the world realized, well, we have this a building block of modern society called a semiconductor, and we really don't want any, well, restrictions on the supply of these building blocks, because it's like water or oil, or you need a very reliable supply chain. And during the pandemic, we realized that our supply chain was, well, too much depending on just a couple of companies in a couple of countries. So that's also a lesson learned. And I think it's logical and makes complete sense to build a more robust supply chain. So even if that means that the system becomes less efficient, and ASML has gonna adopt to that situation. Well, if you compare to geopolitics, of course, there's a huge amount of short-term vision, because politicians see these see technology as a way to well, to make their point and to get more vocal. And I think for ASML, this has become like a daily job, business as usual. So they were surprised about the geopolitical attention for the semiconductor industry as well, and it took them a while to adapt. For the Dutch government, as you also mentioned, it also took a while to realize what they had in their backyard. That was quite a crucial tool for the rest of the world, but they have adopted as well. So things are somehow getting back to normal, even though, of course, ASML is now on every front page, and it will be for the foreseeable future, because, well, we all rely on our semiconductors in our tools we use, the phones we use, the chat GPT questions you ask, and this is not going to go away. And the only reason, only way for ASML to survive in a or to survive and to thrive in an environment like this is well, keeping your eye on the long term and seeing that roadmap, and the fact that the only way to out innovate any competitors, may they come from China or wherever, is to well, keep spending a lot of time on the new technology. And I think this element of keeping R&D at a certain level is still very much within the company. So it's trying to refocus again and not be distracted by all these external powers trying to mingle in with the company. And it's going to be hard, because the company is growing, and it's easier to be well, a bit of obscure if you're still small. But if you're like 40,000 plus employees and you're expecting to double in size, you're going to be very much in the picture for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think to wrap it up, this is something that's very close to my heart, and I was glad to see that you mentioned that too. So it is around understanding and unpacking the kind of mindset and culture it takes to build complex machines like these, right? And how ASML interacts and cooperates within European industry, and the lessons that we can learn as Europeans from on how we can leverage our unique, unfair advantages, right? Which is play the long game when other people are playing it short, right? Focus on the existing, research universities and other assets you have, right? The supplier ecosystems. So like play that game instead of trying to ape Silicon Valley sort of.
But Rita van, even though ASML is like successful, it's not perfect. So there's a lot of chaos on the inside as well, and that's the one of the well, I had a lot of fun writing about these chaotic elements as well, and it's just like any day in ASML something just uh, collapses, or as the present day CEO Christophe Fouquet said, you don't know how much fuck ups we have to build this really complex machine. So there's a lot of internal learning as well, and they embrace that process, which
Correct.
they, they don't thrive for. They don't aim for well for perfection, but for perfect enough. And that's an attitude you don't see at too many other companies.
Yeah, and I think one thing that also stood out was how critical it was important to Martin van der Brink at exec level to do this, and how he would force in every discussion simplification. So he would say things like, would you build this at home, right? Like if you were doing something at
Yeah.
home, would you do this, right? And I think this is a simplification, and it's something I discovered and sort of wrote about in my book too, which is that problem solving is what leads to complexity over time. People are trying to fix things, right? And you describe ASML as this chaotic, living, dynamic organization. And so obviously what that leads to is through this constant decentralized problem solving is the growth of complexity. And so at the exec level is super important to make sure you drive simplification.
Let me follow up on that. And one of the early in the book, I describe the first machine Martin van der Brink actually built or helped build was based on modules. So like these building blocks, Lego blocks, and you still see that as the element to keep machines somehow well simpler. So these are it makes it easier to change part, but also to do testing because the latest machine, the high-NA machine, which costs over 40 million euros, consists of hundreds of thousands of parts, and you have to well uh, keep an eye on every corner of the machine. So the only way to keep it under control, so to say, is splitting up and trying to solve things in parallel. And ASML has gotten to be a master in doing things in parallel. So I compare it to a GPU, a lot of smaller processes, all specialized, happening at the same time. And they also try to not overcomplicate anything thing, because in Martin van der Brink's vision, if you embrace the fact that you're building a complex machine, you're not um, forced to think that it can be simpler. So you just, well, accept the fact it's complex. No, you have to start out with the idea that things can be simpler. Just go back to the Lego style. What are the basic building blocks? And that's the way they still handle business these days, which is um, I think it's a different mindset, as you said.
Yeah, and I think it's both this first principles thinking to simplify, but then also another quote that stood out was, if we wait until the machines work, right, then we're already behind. And so it's like it's this combination of thinking from first principles repeatedly and learning
Yeah.
constantly, and also putting it out there in the world. And the motto is really full of substance, short on ego. And with those words, I'll let you wrap up, and then
Okay. Well, for me, it was a lesson to dive into ASML, because I saw the advantage of a very focused culture, and also about realizing that you're not always the brightest one in the room, and accepting the fact that you need other people's talents to get to a better conclusion. And I think if you look at ASML's moat, so what is unique about the company, I think it's the culture, because there's, of course, there's hierarchy, but there's also a lot of democracy when it comes to sharing your ideas. So even though you've been at the company for just about 2 weeks, you're expected to um, express your opinion, and if you have something to add. And if you have something to add, it could really help in a big way. Um, Even the accidental inventions that were made, or the accidental solutions that were found, they just popped up during a meeting. And even um, the point that the EV machine was uh, almost not successful depended on one engineer saying, "Hey, this might be a thing with oxygen. This might be a solution." And then it's just in a chaotic meeting, it spurs creativity, and they found a solution that actually helped EUV just around the tipping point and being a more successful technology. So embrace chaos, so to speak.
Yeah, embrace chaos with that clear alignment and focus. Um, Thank you so much, Mark. It was a real pleasure speaking with you, and thanks for writing this book.
Okay. Thank you for having me. Bye bye.